Elizabeth Dowell had exactly $47 in her bank account, a son who needed new shoes for school, and 17 minutes before her bus arrived at the downtown Seattle stop. She wasn't looking for trouble. Trouble, however, had a way of finding people who weren't looking for it. The October wind whipped through Pike Street, cutting through Elizabeth's worn jacket like it wasn't even there. She pulled the collar tighter around her neck and shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Her feet ached. 8 hours at the restaurant, followed by 4 hours cleaning offices downtown. 12 hours of work, and she still had to figure out how she was going to stretch $47 until next Friday. But Jalen needed those shoes. His toes were pressing against the front of his current pair, and Elizabeth refused to let her son go to school looking like nobody cared about him. Somebody cared. She cared. She just had to figure out the math. The bus stop at the corner of Pike Street and 3rd Avenue was mostly empty at this hour. A few night workers like herself waited under the dim streetlight, scrolling through phones or staring at nothing in particular. Elizabeth was staring at nothing in particular when she noticed something underneath the bench. A phone. Sleek, black, expensive-looking. Elizabeth glanced around. Nobody was paying attention. Nobody seemed to be searching for anything. The phone just sat there, half hidden under the metal bench, like someone had dropped it and walked away without noticing. She should leave it alone. That was her first thought. Leave it alone. It's not yours, don't get involved. But Elizabeth Dowell had been raised by a mother who believed that doing the right thing wasn't optional. It was mandatory. And leaving an expensive phone to be stolen by the next person who walked by wasn't the right thing. She bent down and picked it up. The screen lit up immediately at her touch. Facial recognition lock. She couldn't access it, but she could see the wallpaper. A simple gray background with what looked like a Korean character in the center. Nothing personal, nothing identifying. Elizabeth looked around one more time. Still nobody searching. Still nobody paying attention. Fine, she would take it home. Tomorrow, she would drop it off at the police station on her way to work. Someone was probably panicking right now, looking for this phone. She knew what it felt like to lose something important. Last year, she had lost her wallet on the bus and spent 3 days in absolute terror until someone turned it in at the transit office. Everything had still been inside, cash included. That stranger had given her hope that decent people still existed. Now it was her turn to be decent. She slipped the phone into her jacket pocket just as her bus arrived. The doors hissed open, and Elizabeth climbed aboard, tapped her transit card, and found a seat near the back. The bus was nearly empty. Just a couple of tired workers and one teenager with headphones so loud Elizabeth could hear the bass from 3 rows away. She leaned her head against the cold window and closed her eyes. What Elizabeth didn't know was that 3 miles away, in a penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, a man named Min-soo was watching his men tear apart a conference room looking for that exact phone. And he was not happy about it. Now, before we continue with what happens when Min-soo discovers exactly who has his phone, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I know you found this video randomly, and I know you're probably thinking you'll just watch without subscribing. But this story is about to get crazy, and I don't want you to miss what happens next. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, hit that like button, and let's get back into this chaos. Min-soo sat in his leather chair, completely still, watching his men search. The conference room was a mess, papers scattered, furniture overturned. His second-in-command, James Ford, stood behind him, speaking rapidly into his own phone in a mix of Korean and English. The penthouse office was one of 5 properties Min-soo owned in Seattle alone. Floor to ceiling, windows offered a stunning view of the city skyline and the dark waters of Elliott Bay beyond. Blue ambient lighting gave the space a cold, almost clinical atmosphere. A crystal ashtray sat on the mahogany desk, smoke curling from a cigarette that Min-soo hadn't touched in several minutes. He was too focused on the problem at hand. The phone contained everything, every corrupt official on his payroll, every shipment route his organization controlled, every piece of leverage he held over every important person in the Pacific Northwest. And most importantly, it contained the evidence he had been gathering for months on the traitor inside his organization. Someone had been leaking information to the Yoon family in Los Angeles, someone close to him, someone he trusted. That phone held the proof. And now it was gone. "We've checked the car," one of his men reported nervously. "We've checked the restaurant. We've checked every location you visited tonight." Min-soo said nothing. The man continued, his voice shaking slightly. "We're pulling security footage from the restaurant now. We'll find it." "You will," Min-soo said quietly. His voice was calm, almost gentle. That was what made it terrifying. "And you will find it within the next 2 hours, or we will have a different conversation." The man swallowed hard and hurried out of the room. James Ford ended his call and approached Min-soo carefully. James was American, a former military contractor who had been with Min-soo for almost 8 years. He was one of the few people in the organization who could speak to Min-soo directly without fear. "I have something," James said. "Security footage from the bus stop outside the restaurant. Someone picked up a phone from under the bench approximately 40 minutes ago." Min-soo turned his head slightly. "Show me." James pulled out his tablet and played the footage. The quality wasn't great, but it was clear enough. A black woman in a worn jacket bent down, picked something up, looked around, and then slipped it into her pocket. A moment later, she boarded a bus. Min-soo studied the footage. The woman didn't look like a thief. She didn't look like someone working for his enemies. She looked like exactly what she appeared to be. A tired woman waiting for a bus who happened to find a phone. "Do we know who she is?" Min-soo asked. "We're working on it. The bus route goes through Rainier Valley. We're pulling passenger records from the transit system." Min-soo stood up. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his cuffs, and walked toward the window. The city glittered below him. Millions of people living their small lives, completely unaware of the world that operated in the shadows. "Find her," Min-soo said. "Tonight before anyone else does." Because if his enemies found her first, they would assume she was connected to him. They would assume she had valuable information. They would use her to get to him. And then they would dispose of her. Min-soo didn't know this woman. He didn't owe her anything. She had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But he was not in the business of letting innocent people pay for his mistakes. Not anymore. Elizabeth's apartment in Rainier Valley was small but clean. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that doubled as a dining room, and a living room just big enough for a couch and a television. The walls were painted a warm yellow color that Elizabeth had chosen specifically because it reminded her of sunshine. She needed reminders of sunshine. Seattle had a lot of gray days. Jalen was with her mother tonight. Mrs. Dowell had come out from Chicago 6 months ago to help Elizabeth get back on her feet after the divorce. She was supposed to stay for 2 weeks. She had ended up staying for 6 months and counting. Elizabeth didn't mind. Having her mother nearby meant she could work double shifts without worrying about Jalen being alone. Tonight, she was grateful for the empty apartment. She needed silence. She needed rest. Elizabeth set her bag on the kitchen counter and pulled out the phone she had found. She placed it next to the refrigerator, which was covered in Jalen's drawings and alphabet magnets. A crayon picture of what was supposed to be their family stared back at her. 3 stick figures. Elizabeth in the middle, Jalen on one side, Grandma on the other. No father. Jalen had stopped drawing his father about 4 months ago. Elizabeth pushed that thought away and focused on the phone. She would deal with it tomorrow. Right now, she needed water, maybe some toast, and about 10 hours of sleep that she definitely wasn't going to get. She was filling a glass at the sink when the phone lit up. Then it buzzed. Then it buzzed again. And again. Elizabeth turned around slowly. The phone screen was alive with notifications. Message after message flooding in. She couldn't read most of them because they were in Korean, but some of them were in English. She picked up the phone and looked at the preview notifications. Where is the shipment? The Tacoma situation needs to be handled. We have a problem with the product. Contact me immediately. Elizabeth's stomach dropped. She scrolled through more notifications, her heart beating faster with each one. Did you find the leak? The Yoon family is making moves. We need to meet, tonight. And then one message that made her blood run cold. Find the phone, find who has it, handle them. Elizabeth's hands started shaking. She almost dropped the phone but managed to set it down on the counter with trembling fingers. Her mind was racing. Shipment, product, handle them. This wasn't a normal phone. This wasn't some businessman who accidentally left his device at a bus stop. This was something else, something dangerous. She needed to get rid of it, throw it away, pretend she never found it. But even as she thought that, she knew it wouldn't work. Someone was looking for this phone, someone with the resources to track it, someone who sent messages about handling people. What had she gotten herself into? Elizabeth backed away from the counter, her eyes fixed on the phone like it was a snake that might strike at any moment. She needed to think. She needed to figure out what to do. And then there was a knock on her door. Elizabeth froze. It was 11:47 p.m. Nobody knocked on her door at 11:47 p.m. She didn't move. Maybe if she stayed quiet, whoever it was would go away. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe it was someone at the wrong apartment. The knock came again, harder this time. Then a voice, male, professional. Seattle Police Department. We received a report about a disturbance. Elizabeth exhaled slowly. Police. It was just police. Maybe someone heard something. Maybe there was an issue in the building. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Two men stood in the hallway. One was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a gray suit. He had his phone pressed to his ear and was speaking in what sounded like Korean. The other man stood slightly in front, perfectly still. Dark suit. Expensive. Eyes that seemed to look right through the door and into her soul. Those weren't police. Elizabeth knew police. She had grown up in Chicago. She knew what police looked like, how they carried themselves, how they spoke. These men were not police. She stepped back from the door, her heart hammering in her chest. The knock came again. We know you're home, Ms. Dowell. The voice was calm now, no more pretending. We know you found something that doesn't belong to you. We just want it back. This doesn't have to be complicated. How did they know her name? How did they find her so fast? Elizabeth looked around her apartment desperately. Back door, fire escape, something. But there was only one way in and one way out of this apartment. She was trapped. The door handle jiggled slightly. Then there was a soft click. Elizabeth watched in horror as her door swung open. The two men stepped inside. The one in the gray suit closed the door behind them and positioned himself near the exit. The other one, the one in the expensive dark suit, looked around her apartment slowly. He took in the refrigerator covered in Jalen's drawings, the toys on the counter, the worn furniture, the small signs of a life being lived on a tight budget. Then his eyes landed on the phone sitting on the counter. And finally, his eyes moved to Elizabeth. You have something that belongs to me, he said. His English was perfect. His tone was ice. Elizabeth's survival instincts screamed at her to run, to fight, to do something. She grabbed the nearest thing she could find, which happened to be a spatula from the dish rack, and held it in front of her like a weapon. The man in the gray suit actually laughed. The man in the expensive suit did not. His expression didn't change at all. He simply looked at the spatula, then looked at Elizabeth, then spoke again. My name is Min-Soo. I'm going to retrieve my phone, and then I'm going to ask you some questions. If you answer honestly, you have nothing to fear from me. If you lie to me, we will have a problem. Do you understand? Elizabeth's voice came out stronger than she expected. You broke into my apartment, you threatened me, and you expect me to just answer your questions. Min-Soo studied her for a moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Most people didn't talk back to him. I didn't break in, he said. I unlocked your door, there's a difference, and I didn't threaten you. I stated a fact, there's also a difference. Get out of my apartment. No. Elizabeth's grip tightened on the spatula. She knew it was useless. She knew she couldn't fight these men, but she refused to show fear. She refused to give them the satisfaction. I found that phone at a bus stop, she said, her voice steady. I was going to turn it into the police tomorrow. I didn't steal it. I didn't look through it. I didn't do anything wrong. Min-Soo walked past her slowly, retrieved the phone from the counter, and examined it. The screen lit up at his touch, facial recognition unlocking it immediately. He scrolled through something for a moment, then slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. Then he turned back to Elizabeth. "You're telling the truth," he said. "Of course I'm telling the truth. I'm not a thief." "No," Minsu agreed. "You're not, but that doesn't solve my problem." Elizabeth lowered the spatula slightly. "What problem? You have your phone, leave." Minsu glanced at James Ford, who was still standing by the door. James shook his head slightly and spoke. "We have a situation. When Ms. Dowell picked up the phone, she was recorded on security footage. That footage has already been accessed by parties other than ourselves." Elizabeth's confusion must have shown on her face, because James continued. "Mr. Minsu has enemies. Those enemies have been looking for an opportunity to get to him. When they see that footage, they will assume you are connected to him. They will assume you have information. They will come for you." The blood drained from Elizabeth's face. "Connected to him? I don't even know who he is. I picked up a phone. That's all I did." "I know," Minsu said. His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "But they don't know that, and they won't care." Elizabeth felt like the walls were closing in on her. This couldn't be happening. She was a single mother working 2 jobs trying to survive. She didn't have enemies. She didn't have secrets. She wasn't part of whatever world these men came from. But that didn't seem to matter. "What are you saying?" she asked, already dreading the answer. Minsu met her eyes directly. "I'm saying you have 2 choices. You can stay here and wait for them to find you, or you can come with me until this situation is resolved." "Come with you? I don't know you, I don't trust you." "You shouldn't trust me," Minsu agreed. "But you should trust the fact that I have resources they don't. Protection they can't match. If you stay here, you will be found within 24 hours. If you come with me, you will be safe." Elizabeth shook her head. No, this is insane. I'm not going anywhere with you." Minsu's expression didn't change. He simply nodded toward the refrigerator. "Those drawings, you have a child." Elizabeth's heart stopped. "Don't you dare bring my son into this." "I'm not bringing him into anything. Your decision to pick up that phone already brought him into this. The question now is whether you're going to protect him or not." It was a low blow. Elizabeth knew it was a manipulation tactic, but that didn't make it any less effective. She thought about Jalen, 7 years old, innocent, trusting. He had no idea that his mother had just accidentally stepped into something dangerous. And she would do anything to keep him safe. Anything. "If I come with you," Elizabeth said slowly, "what happens to my life, my job, my son's school?" "Your son will come with you. His safety is now my responsibility. Your jobs will be handled. You will receive compensation for your time. And when this situation is resolved, you will return to your normal life." "How long?" "A few days, maybe a week." Elizabeth stared at him, trying to find the lie, trying to find the trap. But Minsu's face gave nothing away. He was perfectly composed, perfectly patient, perfectly in control. She hated him for it. "Fine," she said finally. "But if anything happens to my son, I will kill you myself. I don't care who you are." Something almost like a smile crossed Minsu's face. "Fair enough." The drive from Rainier Valley to Medina took about 30 minutes at that time of night. Elizabeth sat in the back of a black SUV with tinted windows, watching the city lights blur past. James Ford drove. Minsu sat in the front passenger seat, his attention focused on his phone, typing messages that Elizabeth couldn't see. She had called her mother from her apartment before they left. The conversation had been brief and terrifying. "Mama, I need you to pack a bag for Jalen. I'll explain everything when I get there. We have to leave the city for a few days." Mrs. Dowell had asked questions that Elizabeth couldn't answer. In the end, she had simply trusted her daughter. That was what mothers did. They picked up Jalen and Mrs. Dowell's apartment in Columbia City 20 minutes later. Jalen was half asleep, clutching his favorite dinosaur plushie and asking confused questions about where they were going. Elizabeth made up a story about a surprise vacation, a special trip, an adventure. Jalen believed her, because that was what children did. Mrs. Dowell did not believe her, but she also didn't argue. She simply looked at the expensive SUV, the men in suits, and her daughter's barely concealed terror, and she made a decision to keep her mouth shut until they were alone. The Medina house was unlike anything Elizabeth had ever seen in person. It sat on the shores of Lake Washington, surrounded by other mansions owned by tech billionaires and hedge fund managers. The driveway alone was longer than the entire block Elizabeth lived on. Jalen woke up completely when he saw the house. His eyes went wide as saucers. "Mama," he whispered, "are we staying here?" Elizabeth couldn't answer. She was too busy trying not to have a panic attack. James Ford led them inside while Min-soo stayed behind, speaking with another man who had been waiting at the house. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. High ceilings, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Everything was modern and sleek, and clearly cost more than Elizabeth would make in 10 lifetimes. "There are 6 bedrooms on the second floor," James said, his tone completely professional. "You and your son can choose any two. Mrs. Dowell, there's a room prepared for you as well, should you choose to stay." Mrs. Dowell raised an eyebrow. "Should I choose to stay? Baby, are you going to explain what's going on here?" Elizabeth looked at James. "Can we have a moment alone?" James nodded and stepped out of the room, closing the door behind him. The moment he was gone, Mrs. Dowell turned to her daughter with a look that Elizabeth knew all too well. It was the look that said she had about 5 seconds to start talking before her mother started demanding answers. "Mama, I made a mistake. I found a phone at the bus stop and I picked it up. I was going to return it, but it belonged to someone dangerous, and now dangerous people think I'm connected to him." Mrs. Dowell stared at her. "What kind of dangerous people?" Elizabeth hesitated. "I don't know exactly, but they have a lot of money and a lot of power. And the man who owns the phone, he said we're not safe at home right now. He said he can protect us until this is handled." "And you believe him?" "I don't know what to believe, but I believe that my apartment has one lock and these men walked right through it. I believe that whoever is looking for me has resources that I can't fight, and I believe that keeping Jalen safe matters more than my pride." Mrs. Dowell was silent for a long moment. Then she looked around the expensive room and sighed. "Well, at least they have money." Elizabeth almost laughed. Almost. Jalen, oblivious to the tension, was running around the room touching everything he could reach. "Mama, look at this couch. It's so big. Can we keep it?" "No, baby. We're just visiting." "For how long?" Elizabeth didn't have an answer for that. The first 2 days were strange. Elizabeth and her family stayed in the Medina house, surrounded by luxury they didn't understand and couldn't enjoy. James Ford came and went, bringing updates that didn't make sense to Elizabeth and food that was fancier than anything she'd ever cooked. Jalen thought the whole thing was an adventure. He explored every room of the massive house, played in the backyard that overlooked the lake, and asked approximately 7,000 questions about everything he saw. Why is the refrigerator so big? Why does the toilet have buttons? Why can the blinds open by themselves? Who lives here? Is this a castle? Can we live in a castle? Elizabeth didn't have answers for most of his questions. She just watched him run around with a mixture of love and fear. Min-soo was mostly absent those first 2 days. He came and went at odd hours, always in different expensive suits, always accompanied by serious-looking men speaking into earpieces. Elizabeth caught glimpses of him occasionally, but they didn't speak. She wasn't sure she wanted to speak to him. Mrs. Dowell, meanwhile, made herself at home. She found the kitchen, declared it ridiculous but acceptable, and started cooking. By the second night, the smell of her collard greens and cornbread filled the house, and even some of the security guards started wandering toward the kitchen with hopeful expressions. On the third night, Min-soo came home early. Elizabeth was in the kitchen with her mother, helping chop vegetables, when he walked in. He stopped in the doorway, looking almost confused by the scene in front of him. "What is that smell?" he asked. "Dinner," Mrs. Dowell said without looking up. "You hungry?" Min-soo blinked. In all the years James Ford had known him, he had never seen anyone speak to Min-soo so casually. It was almost funny. "I don't usually eat here," Min-soo said. "Well, you're eating here tonight. Sit down." Elizabeth watched the exchange with a mixture of horror and admiration. Her mother had a gift for treating everyone exactly the same, regardless of who they were or how much power they had. Minsu sat down. Mrs. Dowell served him a plate of fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, and macaroni and cheese. It was the same meal she made every Sunday back in Chicago. Comfort food, family food. Minsu looked at the plate like he didn't know what to do with it. "Do you need a fork?" Elizabeth asked, unable to hide her slight amusement. "I know how to use a fork," Minsu said, a hint of defensiveness in his voice. "Then use it." He did. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Jalen, who had been playing in the living room, came running in when he smelled food. "Is it dinner time? I'm starving. I'm so starving, Mama." "You're always starving," Elizabeth said. "Wash your hands first." Jalen ran to the sink, washed his hands for approximately 3 seconds, and then climbed into the chair next to Minsu. "Hi," Jalen said. "I'm Jalen, I'm 7, what's your name?" Minsu looked at the child like he was an alien species. "Minsu." "That's a weird name. Are you Chinese?" "Jalen," Elizabeth said sharply. "What? I'm just asking." Minsu's expression shifted slightly. Was that amusement? "I'm Korean." "Oh, what's Korean?" "It's a country, in Asia." "I know what Asia is," Jalen said proudly. "We learned about it in school. It's the big one." "That's correct." "Do you have any kids?" "No." "Why not?" "Jalen," Elizabeth said again, more firmly this time. "Let the man eat." Jalen shrugged and turned his attention to his own plate. But throughout the meal, Elizabeth noticed him sneaking glances at Minsu with open curiosity, and she noticed something else too. Minsu kept sneaking glances right back. After dinner, Mrs. Dowell took Jalen upstairs for his bath. Elizabeth stayed in the kitchen, cleaning up, trying to avoid the conversation she knew was coming. Minsu didn't leave. He sat at the table, watching her move around the kitchen with an expression she couldn't read. "You don't have to do that," he said finally. "There are people who can clean." "I like cleaning. It helps me think." "What are you thinking about?" Elizabeth paused, a dish towel in her hand. "I'm thinking about how I ended up in a mansion with a man I don't know, hiding from people who want to hurt me because I picked up a phone." Minsu nodded slowly. "That's fair." "I'm also thinking about what you actually do, and whether I should be more afraid of you than whoever you're protecting me from." The silence stretched between them. Minsu's expression didn't change, but Elizabeth thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, something almost like respect. "You're direct," he said. "I appreciate that." "I don't have time for games. I'm a single mother with a 7-year-old and bills to pay. I don't do subtle, so tell me, what do you do? Who are you? And don't lie to me, I'm living in your house." "I deserve the truth." Minsu considered her question for a long moment. Then he spoke. "My family built an empire over 3 generations. Some of what we do is legitimate: real estate, import and export, restaurants, investments. Some of what we do is not. I control what happens in the shadows of the Pacific Northwest. I handle things that the law cannot or will not handle. I have influence over people who prefer to keep that influence secret." Elizabeth stared at him. "You're a crime boss." "I prefer to think of myself as a businessman with flexible ethics." "That's a fancy way of saying crime boss." Minsu almost smiled. "Almost. I suppose it is." Elizabeth set down the dish towel. "So why are you protecting me? I'm nobody. I'm not connected to your world. I'm not valuable to you." "You're not nobody. You're a witness. You picked up something that doesn't belong to you, and now my enemies think you have information. If they get to you before I resolve this situation, they will hurt you to get to me. That's my fault, not yours. And that matters to you." Minsu was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "It didn't used to. I didn't used to care about collateral damage. But I've learned that every decision has consequences. Every action creates ripples. You picked up a phone, and now your life is in danger because of something I did. I won't pretend to be a good man, but I'm trying to be less of a bad one." Elizabeth didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't the answer she expected. Before she could respond, James Ford entered the kitchen. His expression was serious, more serious than usual. "We have a development," he said. "The tracking on your phone, it wasn't lost randomly, it was placed." Minsu stood immediately. Explain. Someone in the organization deliberately left the phone at that bus stop. The location was too specific. The timing was too perfect. Elizabeth finding it wasn't an accident. She was chosen. Elizabeth felt her blood turn to ice. What do you mean I was chosen? James looked at her with something almost like sympathy. We don't know yet, but someone wanted you to find that phone. Someone wanted you to become a target. Why? I'm nobody. I don't know anything. That's what we're trying to figure out. Minsu's face had gone completely cold. The warmth from dinner, whatever small humanity had been peeking through, was gone. In its place was the man Elizabeth had met the first night, the dangerous one. Find out who, Minsu said, and find out why now. The next few days were tense. Minsu was in and out of the house constantly, meeting with people Elizabeth never saw, making phone calls in Korean that she couldn't understand. James Ford became a constant presence, always nearby, always watching. Elizabeth tried to maintain some sense of normalcy for Jalen. She helped him with his homework. She played games with him in the massive backyard. She told him stories at bedtime about brave knights and magical kingdoms. But inside, she was falling apart. Someone had chosen her. Someone had deliberately put her in danger. But who and why? She didn't know anyone connected to Minsu's world. She was a nobody, a single mother working 2 jobs, barely making ends meet. What could she possibly have that anyone would want? On the 4th night, she finally asked Minsu directly. He was in his study, a room filled with dark wood and leather furniture and shelves lined with books in multiple languages. He was sitting at his desk, reviewing something on his laptop, when Elizabeth knocked on the open door. Can I come in? Minsu looked up. Of course. She walked in and sat in the chair across from his desk. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I've been thinking, Elizabeth said finally, about who could have done this, who would have known I would be at that bus stop at that exact time. And nobody. I don't tell anyone my schedule. I don't have friends who know my routine. The only people who know where I work are my employers and my mother. So either this was completely random, or someone has been watching me for longer than I realized. Minsu nodded slowly. We've been investigating the same question, and we think we have an answer. Elizabeth's heart rate quickened. Who? My cousin, Daniel Kang. He's been with the organization for 15 years, trusted, respected, and secretly working with the Yoon family for the past 2. Elizabeth shook her head. I don't know anyone named Daniel Kang. I've never met him. You don't need to know him for him to know you. Daniel had access to all my files, including the personnel records for every business we own in Seattle. You work for a restaurant that I own, not directly, but through a series of holding companies. Daniel would have access to your employee file, your address, your schedule. Elizabeth felt like she'd been punched. The restaurant, Ming's Kitchen, that's connected to you. Through 4 layers of corporate ownership, yes. So I've been working for you this whole time without knowing it. Technically, yes. Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, trying to process this information. All those months working double shifts, scrubbing dishes, dealing with rude customers. All those tips she scraped together to pay her bills. And the whole time, the money was flowing to a man like Minsu. Daniel used you because you were convenient, Minsu continued. An innocent woman with no connections to my world. Someone who would pick up a phone and take it home like a good citizen. Someone my enemies could track down and use against me. He wanted to force me into an impossible situation. What situation? Abandon you and look weak, or protect you and become distracted. Either way, he wins. But you chose to protect me. I did. Why? Minsu was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Because I looked at the security footage of you picking up that phone, and I saw someone doing the right thing, someone who didn't take it for themselves, someone who planned to return it. In my world, people like that are rare. I couldn't let you be destroyed for being decent. Elizabeth didn't know what to say. She had expected ruthless calculation from him, strategic thinking, cost-benefit analysis. Not this. Not something that sounded almost like respect. What happens now? She asked. Daniel has been dealt with. He's been exiled from the organization. His accounts have been frozen. His family name has been erased from our records. He will live, but he will have nothing. That's it. He's not going to jail. He's not being punished. Min-soo's expression darkened. Prison is a kindness compared to what I've done to him. He spent 15 years building his position, his identity, his pride. All of that is gone now. He will spend the rest of his life knowing what he lost and why. Elizabeth should have been horrified by the coldness of that punishment, but part of her understood it. This man had deliberately put her son in danger. He had chosen her as a pawn in a power struggle she knew nothing about. He deserved to suffer. Maybe she was changing. Maybe this world was changing her. Or maybe she had always had a darker edge that she kept hidden, even from herself. That night, Elizabeth couldn't sleep. She walked through the quiet house, past the security guards who nodded at her respectfully, past the expensive art and the floor-to-ceiling windows, until she found herself on the patio overlooking the lake. The water was black and still. The city lights glittered in the distance. The air was cold, but Elizabeth didn't mind. She needed the cold. She needed something real to hold on to. Couldn't sleep either. She turned. Min-soo was standing in the doorway, a glass of something amber in his hand. He was wearing more casual clothes than she'd ever seen him in. Dress pants and a simple black sweater. He looked almost human. "Too much on my mind," Elizabeth said. He walked over and stood beside her, looking out at the water. "I used to come here when I was younger," he said quietly. "My father owned this house before me. I hated it then. It felt like a prison. And now I understand why he needed it, why he needed somewhere quiet, somewhere away from the noise." They stood in silence for a while. Elizabeth realized she had stopped being afraid of him somewhere along the way. She wasn't sure when it happened. Maybe during dinner with her mother. Maybe when he talked about wanting to be less of a bad man. Maybe now, standing in the dark, looking at the water. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "You can ask. I might not answer. Have you ever been in love?" Min-soo's expression flickered. "Once, a long time ago." "What happened?" "She wanted a normal life. I couldn't give her that. We ended things before anyone got hurt." "Do you regret it?" "Every day." Elizabeth nodded slowly. "My ex-husband wanted a different life too. A life without responsibilities, without a family. He left when Jalen was 3, said he wasn't ready to be a father." "He was a fool." "Yeah, he was." They looked at each other. Something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of shared loneliness. "You're different than I expected," Elizabeth said. "So are you." The moment stretched. Elizabeth's heart was beating faster, but not from fear, from something else, something she didn't want to name. "I should get back inside," she said. "Jalen sometimes wakes up and looks for me." Min-soo nodded. "Of course." She walked past him, close enough to catch the scent of his cologne. At the door, she paused. "Thank you," she said, "for keeping us safe, for being honest with me." "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over." "I know, but still, thank you." She went inside, leaving him alone on the patio, staring at the water. The relative peace of the next few days was shattered by a phone call that came at 3 a.m. Elizabeth was jolted awake by the sound of raised voices downstairs. She threw on her robe and ran to the landing, where she could see Min-soo and James Ford in intense conversation. "What's happening?" she demanded. Min-soo looked up at her. His face was grim. "The Yoon family. They made a move on your mother." Elizabeth's heart stopped. "My mother, she's in Chicago." "She was in Chicago. She flew here 4 days ago to be with you. She's been staying at her hotel in downtown Seattle. We had security on her, but the Yoons tried to intercept her tonight." "Tried?" "We got there first. She's safe. She's being brought here now." Elizabeth's legs felt weak. She grabbed the railing to keep from falling. Her mother. Her 73-year-old mother who had never hurt anyone in her life, targeted because of her. "I want to see her," Elizabeth said. "Now." "She'll be here within the hour. But Elizabeth, there's something else you need to know." "What?" "The Yoons sent a message. They want a meeting. They want to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" Minsu hesitated, just for a second, but Elizabeth saw it. "They want you," he said. "They want me to hand you over, a symbolic gesture to prove they can take whatever they want from me." Elizabeth felt the floor drop out from under her. "And what did you say?" "I told them no." Just like that. Just like that. "You're under my protection. That's not negotiable." Elizabeth stared at him. This man who had known her for less than 2 weeks. This man who had every reason to cut his losses and walk away. He was risking everything. For her. "Why?" she asked again. She had asked him this question before, but she needed to hear the answer again. She needed to understand. Minsu walked up the stairs until he was standing in front of her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, close enough that she could see the weight he carried. "Because some things matter more than strategy," he said. "Some people matter more than calculations. You matter. Your son matters. I'm not going to let them use you to prove a point." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. She had spent so long being strong, being independent, taking care of everyone else. She had forgotten what it felt like to have someone take care of her. Without thinking, she stepped forward and hugged him. Minsu went rigid. For a moment, she thought she had made a terrible mistake, but then his arms came around her, tentative at first, then stronger. He held her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. They stood like that until James Ford cleared his throat awkwardly. "Sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Dowell has arrived." They separated quickly. Elizabeth wiped her eyes and ran downstairs to greet her mother. Mrs. Dowell looked shaken but unharmed. The moment she saw Elizabeth, she pulled her into a fierce hug. "I'm okay, baby. I'm okay. Those nice men got to me before anything happened." "Nice men?" Elizabeth looked at the security team that had escorted her mother. They were large, intimidating, and covered in tactical gear. Nice wasn't the word she would have used. "They were very polite," Mrs. Dowell insisted, "and one of them bought me a coffee while we were waiting for the car." Elizabeth laughed despite everything. Of course her mother would focus on the coffee. Over the next few days, the tension in the house was unbearable. Minsu was in constant meetings, planning for the confrontation with the Yoon family. James Ford was on the phone every few hours with updates. Security had been tripled around the property. But in the middle of all that chaos, small moments of normalcy kept happening. Jalen, completely oblivious to the danger, continued to explore the house and ask endless questions. He had discovered the pool and spent hours splashing around while Elizabeth watched nervously from the deck. He had befriended 2 of the security guards and convinced them to play hide and seek with him. He had found the movie theater room in the basement and declared it the coolest thing ever. And he had somehow adopted Minsu as his new favorite person. Elizabeth first noticed it when she found Jalen in the kitchen, sitting at the counter while Minsu showed him how to fold origami cranes. She stopped in the doorway, watching them work together in comfortable silence. "See, you fold this corner to meet that edge," Minsu was saying. "Exactly, good." "This is hard," Jalen said, his tongue poking out in concentration. "Everything worth doing is hard at first, but you keep practicing and it becomes easier." "Did you practice a lot when you were a kid?" "Yes, my grandmother taught me. She said every crane carries a wish. If you fold 1,000 cranes, your biggest wish comes true." 1,000, that's so many. "It is, but some wishes are worth 1,000 cranes." Elizabeth's heart ached. She had never seen Minsu like this, patient, gentle, almost soft. This was a side of him that he kept hidden from the world, a side that only came out around children and late-night conversations and moments when his guard was down. She was falling for him. The realization hit her like a punch to the stomach. She was falling for a crime boss, a dangerous man, a man who lived in a world she didn't understand and couldn't belong to. This was insane. But her heart didn't care about logic. Her heart only knew what it felt. That night, after Jalen was asleep, Elizabeth found Minsu in his study again. He was alone, staring out the window at the city lights. "You're good with him," she said from the doorway. "With Jalen." Minsu turned. "He's a good kid. You've raised him well." "It's mostly his grandmother's influence. I just try to keep up." Minsu smiled slightly. Your mother is a force of nature. That's one way to put it. Elizabeth walked into the room and sat in the chair across from his desk. The same place she had sat when he told her the truth about what he did. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You keep asking me that. You can just ask. Why don't you have children? Earlier, you seemed so natural with Jalen, like you were meant to be a father." Min-Soo's expression shifted. Something painful flickered across his face. "I chose this life," he said slowly. "When I was young, I had a choice. Walk away from everything my family built and live a normal life, or stay and become what I am now. I chose to stay." "Why?" "Because my father needed me. Because my grandfather's legacy needed me. Because I thought power was worth more than happiness. And now? Now I know I was wrong, but it's too late to change. I am what I am, and I wouldn't wish this life on anyone, especially not a child." Elizabeth studied him. She saw the loneliness behind his eyes, the regret, the yearning for something he believed he could never have. "It's not too late," she said softly. "It's never too late." Min-Soo looked at her, really looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time. "You actually believe that, don't you?" he said. "I have to. I've spent my whole life believing that things can get better. If I stop believing that, what's the point?" He stood up and walked around the desk. He stopped in front of her chair, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't read. "You're remarkable," he said. "You know that. I'm just a single mom trying to survive." "No, you're much more than that. You're brave. You're kind. You're fiercely protective of the people you love. You see the best in people, even when they don't deserve it." Elizabeth's heart was pounding. "Are you talking about yourself?" "Maybe." He reached out and touched her face. His hand was warm against her cheek, gentle, reverent. "I shouldn't do this," he said quietly. "I shouldn't want this. You deserve better. Let me decide what I deserve." She stood up, closing the distance between them. They were inches apart now, close enough that she could feel the heat from his body, close enough that she could count his heartbeats. "Elizabeth," he said. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. She kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, but then something ignited between them and the kiss deepened. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. Her hands gripped his shoulders, steadying herself against the intensity of what she was feeling. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "That shouldn't have happened," Min-Soo said. "Probably not. It can't happen again." "Probably not." They looked at each other for a long moment. Then they kissed again. The meeting with the Yoon family was set for the following week. Neutral ground, a warehouse in the port of Tacoma. Both sides would come with their people. Both sides would negotiate terms. Min-Soo spent every waking hour preparing. Elizabeth saw less of him as the days passed, but when she did see him, something had changed between them. A warmth that hadn't been there before. A connection that neither of them could deny. They didn't kiss again. They didn't talk about what had happened in the study, but they didn't have to. It was there, humming beneath every conversation, every glance, every accidental touch. Mrs. Dowell noticed. Of course she noticed. She had been reading her daughter like a book for 31 years. "You're in love with him," she said one afternoon while they were cooking together. Elizabeth almost dropped the knife she was holding. "Mama." "Don't mama me. I have eyes. And ears. I heard you come back to your room at 2 in the morning the other night. You think I don't know what that means?" Elizabeth's face was on fire. "It's complicated." "It always is. That doesn't answer my question." Elizabeth sighed. "I don't know what I feel. It's too fast. It's too crazy. He lives in a completely different world than me." "So did your father. He was a doctor's son. I was a maid's daughter. We made it work for 35 years. That's different." "How?" He's dangerous, Mama. He does things I can't even think about. He has enemies who want to hurt him. Being with him means putting Jalen at risk." Mrs. Dowell was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. "You know what I see when I look at that man? I see someone who would burn the world down to protect my grandson. I see someone who treats you with respect. I see someone who is lonely and lost and looking for something to believe in. Those aren't small things, baby. Those are the things that matter. But the other stuff. Every person has shadows. Some shadows are just bigger than others. The question is whether the light is worth it. Elizabeth didn't have an answer for that. The night before the meeting, Min-soo came to Elizabeth's room. I need to tell you something, he said. Tomorrow might not go well. The Yoons are unpredictable. I don't know what they'll do. Elizabeth felt her stomach drop. What are you saying? I'm saying that if something happens to me, James Ford has instructions to get you and your family to safety. You'll be relocated. New identities, new lives, whatever it takes to keep you protected. Nothing is going to happen to you. You don't know that. Then let me go with you. Min-soo shook his head firmly. Absolutely not. I'm the reason this started. I should be there. No, you're too important. Jalen needs you. And what about what I need? Elizabeth stepped closer to him. What about the fact that I can't imagine anything happening to you? What about the fact that I... She stopped herself, but they both knew what she had been about to say. Min-soo took her hands in his. Elizabeth, listen to me. I have spent my entire life making calculated decisions, weighing risks and rewards. This is the first time I've ever made a decision that wasn't about strategy. It wasn't about power. It was about something more. What was it about? You, it was about you. And I refuse to let anything happen to you. Not tomorrow, not ever. Do you understand? Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. What if I'm not ready to lose you? Min-soo pulled her close. He held her against his chest, his chin resting on top of her head. You won't lose me, he said. I promise. The warehouse in the port of Tacoma was a massive structure, surrounded by shipping containers and industrial equipment. Min-soo arrived with James Ford and a contingent of his best people. The Yoons arrived with their own. The meeting took place in the center of the warehouse, under harsh fluorescent lights. Min-soo stood on one side. Vincent Yoon, the leader of the Yoon family, stood on the other. Vincent was a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and cold eyes. He looked at Min-soo with thinly veiled contempt. You've caused a lot of trouble, Vincent said. All for a woman you don't even know. I know her well enough. She's nobody. A single mother working minimum wage jobs. What could she possibly mean to you? Min-soo's expression didn't change. That's none of your concern. Vincent laughed. This is what I never understood about you, Min-soo. You have all this power, all this influence, and you waste it on sentimentality. Your father would be ashamed. My father would have done exactly what I'm doing. Your father would have handed her over and moved on. That's what smart men do. They don't let emotions cloud their judgment. Then I suppose I'm not a smart man. The tension in the warehouse was suffocating. Every person there was armed. Every person there was ready for violence. Vincent stepped forward. Here's my offer. Give me the woman, just hand her over. A symbolic gesture. Proof that you understand your position in the hierarchy. In exchange, I'll forget about all of this. We can go back to business as usual. Min-soo didn't hesitate. No. Think carefully. You're risking a lot for someone who won't even understand the sacrifice. She'll understand, and the answer is still no. Vincent's expression hardened. Then we have a problem. No, you have a problem. Min-soo reached into his jacket and pulled out a tablet. He tapped the screen and a series of images appeared. This is everything I've gathered on your organization over the past 3 years. Every corrupt official you own. Every illegal shipment you've moved. Every murder you've ordered. All of it documented. All of it ready to be released. Vincent's face went pale. It's a dead man's switch, Min-soo continued. If anything happens to me, to Elizabeth, or to her family, everything goes public. Every news outlet, every law enforcement agency, every government organization. Within 24 hours, the Yoon family will be finished. You're bluffing. Try me. The silence stretched. Vincent looked at the tablet. He looked at Min-soo. He looked at his own men, who were suddenly a lot less confident than they had been moments ago. This isn't over, Vincent said finally. Yes, it is. You're going to leave Seattle. You're going to forget about Elizabeth and everyone connected to her. And you're never going to come after me or my organization again. Those are my terms. They're not negotiable. Vincent stared at him with pure hatred, but he had no leverage. He had no options. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "Fine, you win this round, but don't think I'll forget." "I don't care if you forget or not. I only care that you stay away." Vincent turned and walked toward the exit, his men following behind him. At the door, he paused and looked back. "She must be something special," he said, "to make a man like you throw away everything." Min-soo didn't respond. He simply watched as the Yoons left the warehouse. When they were gone, James Ford approached him. "It's done," James asked. "It's done. You took a big risk." "I know. Was it worth it?" Min-soo thought about Elizabeth, about her strength, her kindness, her fire. He thought about Jalen with his endless questions and his innocent trust. He thought about the future, which for the first time in years didn't feel empty. "Yes," he said, "it was worth it." 1 week later, Elizabeth sat in the kitchen of the Medina house, packing up the last of Jalen's toys. It was time to go home. The danger had passed. The Yoons had retreated. Life could return to normal. Except nothing felt normal anymore. "You don't have to leave," Min-soo said from the doorway. Elizabeth looked up at him. He was wearing his usual expensive suit, but his expression was softer than she'd ever seen it, almost vulnerable. "I have a life to get back to," she said. "A job, bills to pay. I could help with that." "I don't want your help. I want to earn my own way." "I know. That's one of the things I admire about you." Elizabeth finished packing the box and stood up. "This was never going to be a permanent thing. You know that. I'm not part of your world." "You could be." "I don't know if I want to be." Min-soo walked closer to her. "Then tell me what you want. Whatever it is, I'll make it happen." Elizabeth looked at him. This man who had terrified her less than 3 weeks ago. This man who had risked everything to keep her safe. This man who made her feel things she had given up on ever feeling again. "I want to know if this is real," she said. "I want to know if what I feel when I'm with you is something that can last, or if it's just adrenaline and proximity and circumstances." "How do we figure that out?" "We take it slow. We go on actual dates. We do the things normal people do when they're getting to know each other. No security teams, no safe houses, just us." Min-soo considered this. "I'm not very good at normal." "Neither am I, but I'm willing to try if you are." A slow smile spread across his face, the first real smile she had ever seen from him. "I'm willing to try," he said. 6 months later, Elizabeth's life had changed completely. She had opened a small catering business, operating out of a commercial kitchen in Capitol Hill. Her specialty was fusion comfort food, soul food with Korean influences, Korean dishes with Southern flair. It had started as an experiment, something she and Min-soo had cooked up together during late-night conversations about their childhoods and their cultures and the foods that made them feel at home. The business was a hit. Word spread quickly through Seattle's foodie community, and soon Elizabeth was catering events all over the city. She had hired 2 employees and was looking at expanding into her own restaurant space. She suspected the anonymous investor who had funded her startup was the same man who slept next to her every night. She had never asked. She didn't need to. Jalen had adjusted to the new normal with the resilience only children possess. He had 2 homes now. His original apartment in Rainier Valley, which Elizabeth had kept because she refused to become dependent on anyone, and the Medina house, where he spent weekends with Coach Min, as he called him. Min-soo took his coaching duties very seriously. Every Sunday morning, they practiced soccer in the backyard. Jalen was terrible at it, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the laughter, the connection, the way Min-soo looked at Jalen like he was the most important person in the world. Mrs. Dowell had finally returned to Chicago, satisfied that her daughter was in good hands. She called every day and threatened to move back permanently if she didn't get regular updates on that nice Korean boy. Min-soo, for his part, had never been called a nice boy in his life. He found it both amusing and terrifying. One evening, after Jalen had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Elizabeth found Min-soo on the patio where they had first had a real conversation. He was looking out at the water, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, sitting down beside him. The future. What about it? Min-soo turned to look at her. His eyes were soft in the moonlight. I never thought I would have this, he said. A home, a family, someone who sees me for who I am and still wants to stay. You do have it. You have all of it. I know. That's what scares me. Elizabeth took his hand. Why does it scare you? Because I don't want to lose it. And in my world, the things you love are always the things that get taken away. Elizabeth squeezed his hand. Then we'll just have to hold on tighter. Min-soo looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elizabeth's heart stopped. I know it's too soon, he said quickly. I know we said we would take it slow, and I'm not asking you to answer right now, but I wanted you to know that I'm serious about this, about us, about everything. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond on a gold band. Whenever you're ready, he said, I'll be here. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. She thought about everything they had been through, everything they had overcome, everything they had built together. Ask me, she said. What? Ask me properly. Min-soo stared at her. Then a slow smile spread across his face. He got down on one knee, right there on the patio, with the water glittering behind him and the stars shining overhead. Elizabeth Dowell, he said, will you marry me? Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger. Then he stood up and pulled her into his arms, kissing her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Because to him she was. 1 year later, they were married in a small ceremony at the Medina house. Mrs. Dowell cried. Jalen served as ring bearer and took his duties extremely seriously. James Ford stood as Min-soo's best man and made a speech that was surprisingly touching for a former military contractor. Elizabeth wore a simple white dress that her mother had helped her choose. Min-soo wore a traditional Korean hanbok in dark blue, a tribute to his heritage and his grandmother, who had taught him to fold paper cranes. At the reception, Jalen asked Min-soo when he could start calling him Dad. Min-soo looked at Elizabeth, who nodded through her tears. Whenever you're ready, Min-soo said. I'm ready now. From that day forward, he was Dad. Elizabeth had found a lost phone on a Seattle bus stop. She had been looking for a way to do the right thing. Instead, she had found something else entirely. A family. A future. A love that she never saw coming. And sometimes that's how the best stories happen, not through grand plans or careful calculations, but through small decisions, random moments, the choice to do something kind when it would be easier to look away. Elizabeth Dowell had picked up a phone that didn't belong to her. And in doing so, she had found exactly where she belonged. Thank you for watching to the end. Please remember to click the subscribe button and make sure you like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you.